Hello, everyone. My name is Cameron Cowan, and as you can see, we're back with the lovely Zolal Habibi, who we're going to talk about. Guess what? We're going to talk about Iran again, and you'll never guess why. No, I'm joking. But she's back. We're going to talk about Iran a little bit, and because it's so timely, we're going to do it live, like we always do, rather than a pre-recorded thing that won't come out for 3 weeks when the entire situation has changed. So, welcome back, Zolal, to the Cameron Journal podcast.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be with you. And let me greet those who are tuning in live or watching this program afterwards. Thank you for the time.
Yes, no. So I want to dive right because we've already met, we've talked, we've cavorted all this type of thing. So I want to dive right into the current situation and how your community is reacting to this, especially given that some people on the ground feel like that there's a little bit of a hey, we're the ones getting bombed and doing the dying, but somehow you're like happy about it. There's like that dynamic. Obviously, geopolitically, things are quite crazy. We're facing an absolutely massive oil crisis. This was surprising to say the least, but hard to say it's not a good idea because the regime's been so oppressive and so problematic for so long. So, in the background of everything that's happened and all of that stuff, how are you reacting to it? How's your community reacting to it? What are you seeing, hearing, and feeling these days?
Well, I think that there are a lot of mixed feelings among the Iranians,
Mm.
um, especially like maybe the first day of the war. Right now, though, I think for the most part, everyone. I mean, this isn't how we saw it. This was people are happy that Khomeini is not alive. He's been eliminated, but at a price of a war. Um, and I mean, we understand the the complexity of a war, and that wars have casualties. Wars have it's not just being like specific targets or being hit or this and that, and also, what comes afterwards. So right now we are, the people of Iran and the Iranian resistance actually from not today, but for over 20 years has said the solution is neither war nor appeasement. It's to support the people of Iran to be able to bring about change. And I think today, more than ever, the world is starting to realize that that was exactly correct. Because we are in the position that we are today due to the policy of appeasement. And the reality is that the policy of appeasement continued so far that we reached the point that the regime was such a great threat to, the international community. But the reality is that with war, um, war is not going to lead, especially with Iran, it's not going to lead to regime change. It's not going to lead to a democracy being created. Democracy can't be installed. So, what are the, what comes from it and like how it will play out? That is unclear, and I don't think anyone has the power to be able to make that assessment right now, because we don't know in what time period or in what point this war will come to an end. But the reality is that, what has led to this point has been the positive appeasement, and the solution is the overthrow of the regime by the resistance through an organized, resistance with uprising and liberation army of the people of Iran. So I think that that is something that needs to be addressed more because we're not stuck because again the third option, we're not stuck between just these two options. It's either appeasement or war. No, there is a third option, and that's supporting the Iranian people and their organized resistance movement that has been fighting this regime for decades. But unfortunately, due to the policy of appeasement, they were the ones who were used as the bargaining chips at every negotiation, and they paid a grave price for the policy of appeasement, and their hands have been tied due to that. So now that you remove the policy of appeasement, it just starts to open the hands of the Iranian people to be able to take their destiny into their own hands. And I think that's something that's important to recognize and understand.
No, and I want to jump in on that because I think President Trump thought that a few well-placed strikes and bombings would cause the people to rise up against the government, and the regime change would take care of itself, sort of thing. The regime has shown to be surprisingly resilient in face of these attacks, despite the fact we chopped off the top 40 people of their government by air mostly. um and that it has not had quite the result of that so far. From what you're hearing, and
Let me
why has
explain
what is the
something.
situation on the ground?
Yeah, well, let me explain and put that into perspective a bit. The reality is that the Iranian, from day one, we've also explained this. Like Iran is very different from other countries in the region, be it from like a geography perspective, be it from the geopolitical politics of the region, and also like how the structure of the government is itself or the regime is. It's like when we were speaking about foreign intervention, there were two, um, I guess, examples like people would raise. One would be like something like Venezuela, and one would be something like Iraq. Well, with Venezuela, it wasn't going to work because the Iranian regime is not like a classical dictatorship. It's not like, for instance, during the Shah's time, when once the Shah left Iran, 2 weeks later, the whole, the revolution was completed and he was overthrown. It's not the same process, or like in Venezuela with what we're seeing. Um, when you remove Khomeini, the apparatus is still intact.
Right.
The regime, the system is still there. There's still the same way that when Khomeini died, Khomeini replaced him. Now, this time it's turned hereditary for a regime that was supposed to be against hereditary rule from day one, but now they have replaced him with, Moshtaba Khomeini. So they have turned the, you know, the Velayat Faqih to a monarchy in a way. But so that is like the whole system. So the system is still there. And even before the start of the war, Khomeini had given a directive that, especially after their experience with the 12-day war in June, in the summer, that they had in July, they had stated that in that directive that in case that some of the highest officials of this regime are hit, the IRGC has free hands and they can fire at will. And they had already decided on the targets, like this IRGC regiment or whatever will be attacking this area, this one will be attacking that country, this one is that country. So they also already had that. And so once, you know, some of the highest people in this regime were eliminated, they still continued. They were able to move forward. They just moved out of their headquarters. And so now they are in civilian infrastructures. And that is what is also raising, the civilian casualties. And right now we're seeing, the um, infrastructures of Iran being destroyed, civilian homes. Um, War is not just limited to something, small. It does have repercussions and it does have casualties, and that is something that it needs to be taken into consideration and it needs to be, addressed. And that is why we don't support a war because the Iranian regime, as you said, strives on war. That has been its MO from day one. From the time that Khomeini came into power, he knew that whenever they have war or some kind of a crisis, that comes to their aid because it allows them to suppress society completely. It allows them to take full control of society because um, they have excuse for it. So these smoke screens or these crises, this is something that the regime has struck on. Khomeini used to call war as a holy gift during the 8-year war with Iraq. We first had the U.S. hostage crisis and then the start of the war with Iraq. So the first decade of his, this regime, it was all with crisis that the regime could continue its existence. Um, the Iran-Iraq war could have ended in 1983, but it continued till 1988 because Khomeini didn't want to accept that, and he said we were going to fight till the last house standing in Tehran. And the only reason that he eventually did stop, the war, and that was a ceasefire that was signed, it was never a peace treaty, was because he was afraid of the National Liberation Army, coming and, overthrowing the regime. And that is the only reason that he stopped the war. So this regime strives on war because it's able to play both the victim card and the hero card. And especially because this regime doesn't have popular support within Iran or within the Iranian people, this is how it can gather people around the flag outside of Iran, from, different countries or different backgrounds or whatnot. We are seeing that right now in different countries. There are a lot of protests against the war, against the impacts of war, but the regime manipulates that and uses that. So that is why we are moving on a very thin line here in where we stand in both opposing the war and not supporting the regime.
Yes, and I
So it's a
wanted,
very,
yeah, no, no, that's a very handy dichotomy. I know from our last interview, no fan of Reza Pavlian the Shah, but he has now made this international call telling the Iranian people it will not be chaos if you overthrow them. There's this whole infrastructure. We can fly in and return normalcy to Iran right away. And he's kind of making a big thing about that, trying to also encourage this this bottom up revolution. Again, I know you're not a fan of him, but thoughts? I imagine I know what you'll say, but thoughts for the listener?
well, I mean, words are easy to say. But what are you going to do in action? I
Yeah.
think the reality is that
So far, it's a strongly
he
worded press release. So
exactly. I mean, I, I, I mean, you should see how he's being mocked in Persian social media, and also, the concerns of the Iranian community, both inside of Iran and abroad, and their, agitation over the fact that he is being puffed up by certain powers, while he has nothing on the ground. I mean, the fact that he has not been 47 years, he has nothing to show, like a resume. Like, how are you going to, make that promise that, yes, everything will be fine when I come in? On what basis? Where is your, where's your even, your own office? Like, you only have like three, four people working for you. That's not going to be something that's going to run a government, which is quite clear. The reality is that if you look at the blueprint that he has presented for the interim government, which he first has spoken about this just this summer. So before 47 years, there was complete silence, and this summer he came up with a 176-page plan. It's a blueprint for a dictatorship, worse than his father's. And even the interviews that he's doing is very alarming too, because it is everything that he's doing is exactly the continuation of his, father's rule, and that is what the people of Iran revolted against. I mean, the people of Iran threw his father in the dustbin of history. We are not in the business of recycling dictators. He is calling for the revival of the Salon, the revival of the what is he calling them now? The Eternal Guards. He just gave a statement about them just 2 3 days ago again. That we are going to form the revival of this Eternal Guards, which was the IRGC before. So what is he talking? Like, what happened actually after the 1979 revolution? That's really important to understand. The Savak was rebranded as Devak, and the Eternal Guards, or whatever he's calling them now, were rebranded as the IRGC. And now he just wants to go back and change those names again. Well, that's not what the people of Iran want. And the fact that I don't know if you have heard, but unfortunately, a Iranian dissident was murdered in Canada last month. His body was just retained just a few days ago, and two people who have been arrested for this crime right now. We have to see the whole court process and whatnot, but those who have been arrested in connection to this case, they are supporters of Pahlavi.
Mm-hmm.
And why was he the target? Because he had filed a complaint in court against Reza Pahlavi. So this is exactly how the Savak used to work. And right now they're calling for the revival of the Savak, make Savak great again, Savak 2.0. This is exactly what we're seeing. They are bullying people, they are attacking people on the streets, even abroad, and they're not even in power. I mean, Khomeini at least waited until he, you know, reached power before eliminating their opponent. So that is the reality of Reza Pahlavi. And the fact that right now he keeps on giving these statements, like tomorrow is in Iran is Chasham Masudi, which is it's a very old tradition in Iran. It's one of part of the celebration for Nowruz. Nowruz is the Persian New Year, and it is on this Friday is the Persian New Year with the spring equinox. Tomorrow is Chasham Masudi, which is the day that people jump over fire, and it's the Fire Fest in Iran. And he has said, celebrate the Fire Fest and whatnot. And everyone's like, we're already doing that. So what are you trying to do? Trying to say that, oh, if people come and celebrate it, it's because I said so? Or like he keeps on telling people, stay in your homes. Of course, in a war. Of course, people are going to stay in home because there's bomb over their heads. They have to take shelter. They can't come to protest. They can't do anything against the regime right now. So what are you trying to say? You're trying to say, oh, they're staying in their houses because I said so? I mean, this is like a joke. But the reality is that, the things that he's doing, I don't know if you guys, if you saw the prank that was done on him by two Russian pranksters. They presented themselves as, advisors to Chancellor May, and he thought it was a official meeting, and I'm not going to actually even discuss the how he was pranked part because anyone who has any understanding of politics or international politics would have caught on because the person sitting in front of him said, "My name is Adolf," and he had a Hitler mustache, and he didn't catch on to that. First of all, in Germany, that name is forbidden, and
So's the
he said,
mustache.
"My
All of
grandfather
it is
worked with,"
banned. All of it in Germany is banned. Yeah.
and he said, "My grandfather worked with your father," and he didn't catch on to that either. And but that's, I mean, I'm not going to even get into that part of it because that was his just, and he didn't understand. I mean, the Russian accent was clear that that's not the German accent, but that's fine too. I'm not going to even get into that. What I'm getting into is the things that he was saying in this meeting.
Mm.
They said, yeah, Germany is willing to enter in the war, and he's like, that's great. Um, he said, we are willing to bomb Tehran. And he said, that's great. That would be great. So the US and Israel will be isolated in the international community. And we would be more than happy to have you as part of this crusade. First of all,
That's a very
who,
interesting word.
yeah, the word crusade. First of all, who, who is, would want their country to be bombed and their people to be bombed under any circumstances?
Right.
I mean, at what price do you want to come and be placed on the throne, right?
Right.
So that's for one. Second, crusade. Do you understand what that means and what that, you know, um, the implications of such a thing? I mean, do you understand even the words that you're using and saying? And I don't think he does. And the fact that in these meetings, one part of there's a part one, and the part two is what everyone is seeing mostly, but there's a part one. And there they ask him that, well, we have a lot of oil deals currently with the Iranian regime. And he says, well, he already goes and makes promises about keeping those, you know, contracts and whatever, and making sure that, um, they will be, repaid or whatnot for their role.
Right.
And he is also making these promises on television now. I don't know if you saw his interview with Fox and Friends about 2 weeks ago. He says, I promise, in other words, he says, I promise about $1 billion in revenue to the US in the first year if I am placed in position. Um, and then he went on in an interview with Laura Trump. He says, 10 billion, actually 1 trillion, sorry, 1 trillion or $10 trillion in revenue promised to the US in the first decade. So who are
Does
you
he want
making
us
these
to
promises?
annex Iran? They'll love being the 51st state. No, I'm just joking. But like that's what
No,
this starts to sound
no,
like are we just annexing Iran now? Like
but this is exactly what people opposed about your father. The
yeah.
fact that to keep himself in power, he was willing to give all of Iran's resources to foreign countries. I mean, that is exactly why your father was overthrown. And now you want to repeat that in a state that, a country that it's been 37 years since the end of the Iran-Iraq war, but some areas of Iran have not been able to, you know, be built back up since the war. Right now, the devastation of the war in the past, 2.5 weeks, it's 17 days now, and from the start of the war, is far more than the Iran-Iraq war. So, do you understand what that means for the people of Iran, for the infrastructure of Iran, for in how many years and decades it will take to rebuild Iran from this situation?
And Iran will
And
need the
that is
$1 trillion you've
the
just given
response.
away to the United States by word, to rebuild the roads and
Yeah,
bridges and hospitals. Very expensive, all of that. You'll need the money.
yeah. And the other thing is that, I mean, at what price do you want to be placed in? And he actually, in his interview with Fox and Friends, he said something very interesting. Um, uh, he said, what they asked him, would you be willing to go back to Iran? And he's like, yes, in the first opportunity, of course, it has to be orchestrated well. It has to be properly orchestrated. The fact that you use the term properly orchestrated is, that you don't have the means or you know, the strength to be able to create change in Iran yourself. So someone has to create that change and then install you in place. So that
Like
I
what
think
happened
speaks
to his
volumes.
father
And
in
call yourself
53. Yeah.
a it's exactly what happened with his father and his grandfather. So he thinks like that continuation. But the reality is that the people of Iran, that is not where they are right now. I mean, the people of Iran want to take their destiny into their own hands. That's what you saw in the uprisings, even in January. And that is what you're seeing the continuation of. The people of Iran understand that, no one's going to hand us freedom in a silver platter. Even right now, the US and Israel are reiterating that their goal is not a regime change. Um, because you know what? At the end of the day, that is not their issue. That is an Iranian issue. We have the capability to bring about that change. And we have an organized resistance that has been working towards it. The fact that I think it was on the first day of the war that Mrs. Rajavi actually announced the um, provisional government of the National Council of Resistance of Iran for the transfer of sovereignty to the people of Iran and to based on the 10-point plan. The fact is that this provisional government wasn't something that came up like overnight. This was put together, it's thought out in 1980 since 1981. And everyone understands that process, what it means. It's a 6 month interim government. Then there's free elections, where in this election, assembly is elected that will be responsible to create the new constitution and announce the uh, new like government or people who will be in that position. And then after the new constitution is put together, there will be elect. It will be put to vote by the people, and then there will be free elections where the new republic based on the new constitution and the new republic, the elections will be held, and the president or whatnot will be elected. So that is like clear roadmap. The 10-point plan provides that guideline of like what direction we're going into. First of all, it calls for, all of these suppressive forces need to be eliminated, while Reza Pahlavi is calling for, just the brand change. And he calls for a um, martial law in 20 major cities for the first 18 months, while the Iranian resistance doesn't see it that way. And they say, the people of Iran are those who are going to be responsible for bringing about this change because we believe in our people and that they have that capability. And it's going to be, councils that will be formed and they will be, pushing that forward. It calls for separation of religion and state. It calls for um, the rights of ethnicities needs to be recognized, while Reza Pahlavi is already making threats against Iran's ethnicities, be it the Kurds and others, and marking them as separatists and that they need to be dealt with by the army and whatnot. Iran has been a mix of different ethnicities for thousands of years and generations. Um, and that is like the beauty of Iran. But the fact that Reza Pahlavi can't recognize that and to be respectful to them, unfortunately, they suffered suppression from both his father and his grandfather. We had the massacre of the Turks in Azerbaijan. We had the massacre of Kurds. We had the massacre of the Lords. All of them carried out by his father and his grandfather, and he's calling for the repetition of that and the continuation of that. Um,
Which just
the
has no
fact that
place in a modern society. I mean, let's 2026,
no,
folks.
I mean,
You know.
I don't know if you've seen like the videos of like walking in the street with like these crowns, like I don't know if you've seen it. It's a trending in X. You should see it.
Hmm.
They're it's a disgrace. I mean, it's very embarrassing for us as Iranians that people see that and they're like, oh, this is what Iranians are, but it's ridiculous. And the fact that they call him the god of all Iranians and things like, and he doesn't object to any of it. And they are threatening people. They're like, either you say
See,
jolly,
that's why I was so
like
excited to
what?
talk to you because I'm like, this seems to be trending, and I know from our first interview, I'm like, this can't be a good thing. So I'm glad you're doing my job for me. Very good. Continue, continue.
Um, Actually, one of the things that was very alarming for a lot of Iranians is also that if you look in on February 14th, they called a day of action for Iran, like demonstrations everywhere, day of action for Iran. What that meant was like call for war on Iran, actually, but putting that aside now. And they, they were able to bring a lot of people, but they manipulated that number and like presented it as something like far more than it was, like times 10. Um, the crowd that they had in Munich, they said it was 250,000 when it wasn't even, you know, the whole place that they had fits about 300,000, and they were filling about an eighth of it, but they presented that as 250, but that's one thing. And then they had one in Toronto and LA, and they said each one of those are 350. They were still 50 short. So a demonstration that they had in London, which was about 3,000 people, they said it was 50,000. To make it 1 million people, to be able to present it as 1 million people are calling for war on Iran or attack on Iran. In these protests, three speakers, two in Munich and one in LA, used the slogan "One country, one flag, one leader," which is exactly the translation of the slogan from the Third Reich.
Yeah.
And that is alarming to many of us. The fact that to actually use that in Munich, you know,
The
that
irony,
in
I
the
know, it's killer.
irony of
Yeah.
it. And the if you look at that protest, it was supposed to be on the 40th, around the 40th day or whatnot of those who had been killed in Iran. Not one mention of those. I mean, not one slogan in support of those who were killed. Not one slogan in regards to the over 50,000 people who have been detained in Iran. The only slogan that they had was "Long live the Shah." This is the final battle. The Shah is returning, and death to the left, MEK, and the mullahs. So that's it. So nothing against the regime, nothing against Khamenei, nothing like that either. Nothing about the political prisoners in Iran, none of that. It was only concentrated on Reza Pahlavi, King Reza Pahlavi, long live the king, and that's it. And he tries to pose himself that, oh, I'm just going to be a transitional leader. Let's not use titles. Then how come everywhere that you go, the title that your team provides is Crown Prince, and and then your supporters are threatening people for saying even Crown Prince, and they're like, no, you have to call him King. He is King now. And like even in one of the demonstrations in LA, that one of the speakers who is a very close ally of Reza Pahlavi and is like his inner circle, he said, if anyone talks to you about democracy, tell them long live the king. If, that's your response. If anyone speaks about having different, diversity, just say long live the king, and something else. He's like long live the king. It's like that is the only thing that we will say, and that is the only thing that we accept. And now they're making threats against them. They're beating people up in different cities, and it's not just one or two instances in the past few months. I mean, bullying people into becoming silent. And that is exactly what the regime uses because unfortunately, Reza Pahlavi is a dividing force among Iranians. He's not a unifying force among Iran.
No, I
And
mean,
that is,
as I told you before, I was very much hoping that, much like Spain's transition out of Franco, the monarchy could be useful for bringing in democracy. And I was very disappointed in our first interview that that was not the case. And now that you're walking me through this, it's now very obvious that's not the course of action forward. And if anything, he's
it's not,
making the
it's
problem
not a
worse.
friend. It would be like, for instance, the scenario would be like, just imagine like 50, right now we are 50 years later.
Yeah.
Imagine some people supporting the son of Franco returning. That is what
Yes.
we are seeing.
Yeah, literally. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it would be absolutely insane. And everyone in Barcelona will be like, we're not doing that. No one's doing that. Like it's yeah, no, it's quite crazy. I want to expand the conversation regionally because the war has now expanded regionally. The rumor flying around Washington, D.C. these days is that Trump has been in constant conversation with two people, Benjamin Netanyahu, no surprise there, but also Mohammed bin Salman in Riyadh in Saudi Arabia. And Saudi Arabia wants more strikes and more bombing, please. We'll take the hit for the response from Iran. Now, it's no secret that in terms of regional power players, it's Iran versus Saudi, Tehran versus Riyadh. Um, and obviously, Saudi Arabia thinks, if Iran gets taken off the chessboard, we will rule the Middle East roost. Um, how does the regional geopolitics, especially now that Iran is the current regime anyway, is bombing Gulf states, how does that play into the conversation about the future of the country and what regional power situation might exist as this develops?
I think that for the most part, I mean, most of the countries in the region, they really didn't want to be any part of this war, and they really tried to keep, themselves out of it. Unfortunately, the Iranian regime, because it is not a classical dictator and it is the number one state sponsor of international terrorism, and I mean, geopolitically, it is the destabilizing force in the region. It immediately expanded the war um, through other countries in the region, but also even farther than that. Like, I mean, the fact that it even targeted Turkey and Cyprus, and now it's making threats in regards to Albania, which is a NATO country, just because the Iranian resistance is based there, in
As is
Ashraf
Turkey,
3.
as is Cyprus, which is it was a RAF base, which is owned by the United Kingdom. I mean, at some point NATO is going to have to get involved in this because well, three if you count us, the United States, three NATO countries have been hit by Iranian missiles. How long before a NATO response begins to be practical? Anyway, I'm sorry I interrupted you. Please continue.
No, 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 it's okay. So I think that I think most of the countries in the region are very concerned about um, the extent of this war and how much it will drag out and the effects and consequences it will have on their people. I mean, the fact that the Iranian regime targeted Aramco or, like, for instance, airports in some of these countries or civilian locations too. And so that is something that is of major concern to them, but also the hormones um, situation right now, that is also something that is very concerning, the Strait of Hormuz for these countries. So I don't think that they want to see the continuation of the war, but I also think that they might be mm, worried about what comes next or what happens next, and then how that will reciprocate in their societies or in their countries or what effect it will have on them. So I think that that is something that they are concerned about. But I think that more and more they probably do. I mean, I hope that they realize that the Iranian regime, it is, it has entered its final phase. And that is clear. I mean, I think that is clear for everyone, including the regime itself. But what is important is to understand that end to this regime would benefit everyone in the region, and maybe we could see stability and peace in the region. Um, there, I mean, of course, it will have repercussions, I think, throughout the region, but it could be positive repercussions. And um, I don't know how some of those countries may feel about those positive repercussions too, because to have a true democracy in Iran will set a precedent for maybe a lot of other countries in the region. But I think that, you know, being able to eliminate that threat of, Islamic fundamentalism and terrorism that has been, fed throughout the region by the Iranian regime, I think that that would be to the benefit of the world at large and all countries in the region too. But
No,
I
I
think
was
that very
yeah.
countries in the region are hesitant in because they are in direct um, firepower of the regime, and they do have those worries.
No, I was sitting with with one of my friends and sources. We were texting back and forth about the situation, and I said, I don't, I'm like, I think it'd be very, we have to do this with a great deal of care because, we full on invaded Iraq to, create democracy, all this type of thing, which we created a sort of Franken democratic monster in Baghdad. All the trappings, none of the substance, and we it was absolutely hellish to stabilize Iraq, and we never really accomplished it. We just kind of gave up. And he responded very slyly and he said, well, Iran will have one advantage. And I said, what's that? And he said, Iran will not have itself as a neighbor constantly destabilizing it during its regime change. And that will help a great deal. And so, yeah, when you talk about a regionally destabilizing force, obviously there's a lot of competition between Saudi Arabia and Iran over who gets to be the regional power. Obviously, Iran, remember, it's Persia, folks, has been a regional power since antiquity. um, and and Saudi feels a way about that. because they're new, sort of thing, and has been in antiquity. And the regime, I think, has played into that, and with all the destabilization, the funding of Hezbollah, all this sort of thing, has constantly kind of been a thorn in the side, especially since '79. And as I recall, there's also a sectarian difference, and I always get them mixed up. But one Shia, one Sunni, they don't, or they're not always
Iranian,
friends. Yes, thank you.
Saudi is.
I always say it very clearly because I always get them mixed up, and I don't want to be incorrect. But yeah, so there's all these differences. Um, but I also agree with you. A functioning, stable democracy, who else in the region who's under oppressive regimes is going to look around and be kind of like, Iran's got an idea. We're sitting here in the UAE or in Bahrain or in Oman or even in Saudi Arabia. The Iranians have got a good thing going. Maybe we should have ourselves some of that democracy. Then that also would maybe not make some of those leaders so happy themselves. So it's it's an interesting, the regional politics are a very interesting dynamic. There's a lot of resentment towards the US for dragging them all into a war that they did not really choose or want to. They're obviously losing billions a day with the Strait of Hormuz being closed. But also, the prospect of destabilizing in a different way, in a social way, could almost be as dangerous to certain regimes as funding Hezbollah. It's a very complex situation, and I think a lot of people don't fully understand the regional politics of this are as complicated as the internal politics in Iran.
Exactly. It is. It is very complex. There was something else that you pointed out in the beginning that I'd like to address. You pointed out that you thought, in the midst of the war, you would see the people of Iran like fighting back the regime and whatnot. So I'd like to explain a bit about the network of the resistance units in Iran and how they have been pushing forward. And actually, some of the things that happened between the January uprising and before the start of the war, because we were seeing a new momentum and organizing and um, mobilizing on the ground. And so I think that is something that maybe a lot of people might find interesting, and it's something that isn't addressed as much as I think it needs to be addressed because this is actually part of that solution. Because a lot of times when you look at that is the difference that actually I see between the Iranian resistance and the monarchist camp
Mm.
because theirs is just just empty words and it's very easy to talk and just say things, but it's very different when the things that you're saying is based on action on the ground and you have network on the ground and so you're talking from a different position. And I think that is something that's really important to be able to address and to explain. I think previously, the last time we spoke, I explained a bit about the resistance units and the role that they played in the uprising. But uh, the resistance units are the capable force and the backbone of this historic mission to overthrow this regime. They serve kind of like as units in the National Liberation Army of Iran, which we actually used to have. This is a organized fighting force that has taken roots in all provinces of Iran. Um, they they are the force for change on the ground right now, and they are able to open the path through, their bravery and self-sacrifice, but also keeping the flame of, you know, freedom alive in society. I actually yesterday I saw someone compare them to a um, slug hammer,
Mm.
in breaking that laws of suppression. And I think that's a really good description of them, a sledgehammer. And in the past year alone, the number of operations that have been carried out against the suppressive organs of the regime by these resistance units has been 3,000.
Mm.
And this is aside from over 40,000 activities that they have to just raise awareness and things of that nature. During the uprisings in January, they played a decisive role in organizing, guiding, and expanding the uprising. And by confronting the suppressive forces, they were the ones who were able to, disarm suppressive forces. They were able to protect the protesters. And so that was really um, immense role that they played. Unfortunately, in the January uprisings, more than 2,000 members of the resistance units went missing. That we don't know anything about their whereabouts, if they've been killed or they've been arrested. And this is something that I mean, over the past 2 months, there have been a lot of efforts to try to figure it out, but these are the ones that we still have not been able to obtain any news about. In the meantime, during um, I think one of the turning points was February 23rd, so about like 5 days before the start of the war. Um, 250 members of the resistance units carried out a armed attack against Khamenei's headquarters. And you have to understand, this is the most secure location in all of Iran. And at a time that they were on heightened security due to threats of the war starting at any moment. So during this time, they were able to carry out the operation, and there were about 250 people who took part in it. 82 people were either martyred or arrested, or they were killed or arrested during the operation. But um, I think that the impact that it had and the message that it had for the people of Iran, but also for the regime, was immense. Because, first of all, this was unprecedented in over 2 decades, something like this. And on the other hand, it showed the people that the regime is in a much weaker position than it shows or tries to present itself, because such a thing was even possible in the most secure location in all of Iran. And the other was the fight is continuing. So we have not given in, we have not given up. It's not that they suppressed the protest and that's the end of it. What was interesting is like how simultaneous this was. The day before this attack, protests started again in the universities across Iran, because it was the first day that classes were being held on campuses again, because since the uprising, the regime um, had all classes be online only to make sure that people are not able to gather in campuses, because they understood that students were, one of the cores of this uprising. So, um, but the minute that students came back to the campuses, protests began again throughout Iran. And then the next day, simultaneous with the student protest, this attack was carried out. And so um, this shows, the movement and the momentum inside of the country, I think, and the level of courage and self-sacrifice. And it shows their determination to overthrow this regime. And I think that speaks volumes to both the regime and to the people. And I think the fact that this was, you know, right during 1 week after the ceremonies for the memorial of all of those who had been killed in these protests, it just showed, you know, the younger generation, like this is the path forward. We're not mourning. We are making a, commitment, pledge to all of those who lost their lives to continue. And I think that is, that is exactly what breaks through that suppression and gives people the strength to continue. Uh, and I think that uh, this is that driving force that can bring about change. And this is exactly what the regime fears more than anything else, because this is something that it's not unprecedented in our history. I mean, we've had over 120,000 people who have been executed for the cause for freedom, or who have not only executed, been killed by this regime over these 47 years for their stance and for standing by this movement exactly. And so the fact that a resistance that has already sacrificed the lives of 120,000 of its best is able to still continue and grow every day in the younger generation, in throughout the generations in Iran on the ground, I think that speaks volumes. And that is exactly why we so strongly believe that we have the potential and the capability to bring about change.
Yeah.
Yesterday, actually, a audio file was published by Simaya Azadi, it's Iran National Television, the television network of the Iranian resistance. And it is a report of one of the commanders of this operation um, from that day, but it was just sent to them yesterday from the headquarters of the MEK headquarters inside of the country, inside of Iran. So hearing that for me, even as someone who is a member of this movement, someone who understands the ins and outs of this movement, it was, it's tremendous. Just to see, how they're able to do that under such high suppression and how they continue to strive and how they continue to grow. And the fact that even today, the Iranian resistance reiterates, you know, once this war stops, the people of Iran have that potential to bring about that change. Allow them to do it. Stop the current situation so we can move forward and the people of Iran can bring about that change and they can take their destiny into their own hands and to be able to form the future that they they seek. And I think that's a very important message that we need to you know pass forward.
No, and I think it is also, I think, very helpful to remind people how much the regime has taken every opportunity to undermine resistance within the diaspora. I'm only bringing this up to demonstrate how pernicious this is. In the comment section of one of the shorts from our last chat, some very well meaning, but I highly suspect is a bot from the regime, um, made a very terrible comment about you being part of a terrorist organization and how awful it was that I had platformed you, sort of thing. And I'm kind of like, there's no proof of that because we do our homework here. You're dumb. And I'm kind of like, good lord, now the Ayatollah sending commenters to my comment section. You know they're desperate. This isn't Good Morning America or anything. Like, sort of like they're getting real desperate down there. They're sending the bots to my comment section. Um, and so it's something this I mean this is what you guys have been facing
Living with
for.
for
Yes.
40 something.
Yes, I know
Especially,
that none of this is unfamiliar to you, but even I'm kind of like, good lord, they're desperate now. They're in my comment section too. It's terrible.
it's ridiculous, like the amount of like propaganda and cyber warfare that's out there,
Yes.
and like the messaging and everything that they push forward. And one of the things is that if you look at the reports that have actually come out of different cyber security organizations, there have been numerous reports that have come out in the past year. I've seen at least like five different ones. Um, of how the cyber ground is being manipulated by like different sides and even sometimes with the same messaging. Like for instance, the Iranian regime cyber army, they have the cyber army, they have a part of their cyber army which tries to promote like Pahlavi to create that division among Iranians.
Yeah.
And so this is actually something that Reza Pahlavi, when he was asked by Christian Amon for like why don't you tell your supporters to stop the cyberbullying? He's like, well, how do you know they're my supporters? Some of them are the cyber army of the Iranian regime. But I mean, you have to like think for a moment there. Why is it that the Iranian regime is willing to promote me by and you to use that to be able to create division? So
Right.
that means that you somehow align with their needs. At the end of the day, they know that you don't have the possibility or the strength to even create change. So that's why they boost your messaging. And unfortunately, I think Reza Pahlavi is a bit delusioned about like actually how much support he has and how much of it is actually cyber support by the regime. But the other thing is that a lot of Iranians started commenting on that. Well, they're like, okay, well, you don't know about those who are online, but how about your wife and your highest, you know, those who are surrounding you, because they're the ones who take to social media and they are the ones who are promoting this bullying and everything too. So your two top advisors and your wife, they're your inner circle, so you should be, addressing that too. But the
Yeah.
fact that, that cyber army is so active, and there was like the report from Harris and also, you know, one of the Canadian organizations that does cover this issue, and about in regards to like the Israeli cyber army that is promoting Pahlavi too. So we are seeing a lot of those come into play, and I think that that is part of the, um, you know, I guess hybrid warfare that we are faced with right now, and where
No,
we are
no,
in
no.
society.
That's what I no
Like
that's the yeah.
to manipulation is taking, going to high, much, a new level, really taken out of proportion with a lot of things. But, and I guess that with the times, that is what we are dealing with. And, um, but yeah, so I mean, whenever you see that, you're being targeted by cyber army, that you've probably touched on a nerve there.
Yes.
Something you said is correct, and that's why you're being attacked. So,
Yeah.
yeah, that is, yeah,
No, no. I just wanted to give a little insight, but I'm so glad that I brought it up now because that is the I was already aware of Iran's activities and all that, so I wasn't surprised, and that's why I'm kind of like, see, they've been watching. Thank you, dear Iranian regime, thank you so much for watching the Cameron Journal, but please stay out of my comment section. And we always love new listeners, but stay out of the comment section. But just to show that this is already a multi-front war. It's not just missiles, it's not just bombs, it's also cyber. Given media changes, I will be very fascinated to see how the algorithm treats this video and the shorts that I'll make from it, sort of thing. This is happening on a ton of levels. It's even economic now. This is total war in all spheres, and it's in a very dangerous, critical time. But I think it's very interesting to know that even though we might not perceive there being an active movement by the Iranian people to overthrow the regime, I think the wonderful thing we found out from this conversation is no, there is. They're working on it. Give them some time, and that also could be why President Trump has not let up in the attacks, is because obviously the CIA will have known that too and will have said, yeah, a few more bombs and they might have it, sort of thing. So it's a very perilous time. I don't know whether I should apologize for or be hopeful. But it's amazing what has changed since the last time we spoke, and it wasn't even that long ago. So
yeah. I think that one of the things I'd like to address, like really quick, is when we say change is possible by the Iranian people, it's based on like actual, actual specifics. I think if you want to look at like what that structure consists of, it's, there's different components that bring that together, and that is what gives us the power to say, with full belief that we have that possibility to bring about change. One is like first the Democratic Coalition, the fact that the National Council of Resistance um, does embody like people from different ethnicities, different religions, different political backage, political viewpoints and whatnot, and extending that, that solidarity. I mean, the fact that the NCRI has called for the National Solidarity Front, and they have, laid that out for people to be able to join, even if you don't agree with the NCRI. But if you agree on three simple principles, one is the complete overthrow of this regime, two, separation of religion and state, and three, a republic. So it's very basic things, and that's why we say like secular democratic republic, because that covers everything. from that National Solidarity Front. There's a realistic strategy for removing, the IRGC and this regime, and that is with a network of resistance units throughout Iran. Um, and then we have a guiding organization for advancing this struggle that has the experience of 60 years of fighting this regime and the previous regime day in and day out. So I think that's really important. And the fact that we have a plan and program for the post overthrow period. So that is what guarantees that there's not going to be chaos or civil war or any of that that some people do try to present. Um, I think that that is really important to understand. Like those who try to say that that would be the outcome, it's either the regime who wants to scare you of a democratic system, or it's the monarchists who want to scare you of a democratic system. One says there's going to be chaos, and you know that is what the regime says, and the monarchists say that there's going to be civil war, there will be division, and there's going to be separatists and whatnot to try to say you need to consolidate power in. That's their message. And I think that's really important to understand that that's not the case. And if we do have a true democracy in Iran, I think that we will see the country flourish. And with all its ethnicities, with all its different, people from different backgrounds and from different walks of life. And I think that that is the beauty of any society. Diversity is what makes you know, this just a society strives, not vice versa. So I think that's really important to understand and um, to support.
No, absolutely. I mean, I'm very excited for a democratic Iran. I didn't tell you this last time because it's super sappy and dumb, but then we'll be over. I don't know why, but I've always been very drawn to going there. I have no clue why. I have absolutely no clue why. I've just always wanted to, obviously never been able to, sort of thing. So I'm excited for the new democracy, so I can finally find out why my body thinks we need to go there, sort of thing. But it's a
Beautiful, beautiful country with a beautiful culture, and it's known for hospitality. So yeah, it's
yeah.
I look forward to that day too.
No, no, and I think just from a read for as as a geopolitical scientist, all this sort of thing, I look forward to the coming regional stability, and I again, as I said in our first interview, I always laugh about the Iran situation because we did this to ourselves. Like we are the progenitors of most of the problems, and by we I mean the United States. We are the fault of a lot of issues, and I'm hoping that the outcome of all of this is your vision of a free, secular, democratic Iran, and we can hopefully. I guess the only good part about this is that maybe this is our opportunity to right a wrong of something we did very wrong in 1953. Thank you, Kermit Roosevelt. Um, and finally, deliver the future for the country it should have always had all along. So, um, please
We
pardon
hope
our dust, I would say.
no, we hope that that day comes, and and it is part of evolution, right? To be able to evolve and move forward and learn from the lessons that we've learned, I think that those are very key because I think in the past 100 years, Iran has been able to, I mean, if you look at all of this as, the fundaments, those bases that are being created. So the people of Iran, from experience, their own experience, they learned, why it's important to keep your independence, why you need to have, sovereign nation, why dictatorships in all forms, be it turbans or crowns, are against that. And so now this is going to be instilled in our history, and hopefully it'll pave the way for a true democracy that will be able to flourish for, you know, decades and centuries to come, hopefully. But to be able to put this era behind us. So I think that it's taken a process, but I think that, if you compare it to, you know, other eras in history, something like Islamic fundamentalism should have taken about like 500 years to be able to overthrow it or get over it.
Right.
But the fact that our people have fought against it from day one, it has prevented that, and hopefully, um, it won't last over 47 years. It'll be overthrown, and the people of Iran can truly see a true democracy flourish in their country after all these years.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. It's definitely an awkward to be. I'm sitting here being hoping for a freedom and democracy in Iran. Meanwhile, we're fighting off authoritarianism here in the United States. What strange times we live in. But it's an odd time. Well, that's we're over the hour, so I'm going to close it out. Do you want to let people know where to find you and follow you and all that type of thing?
Um, yeah, I could give it to you so you could add in the notes, but
Yeah.
I think you have. But if you would like to learn more about the National Council of Resistance of Iran, visit ncr-iran.org. To learn more about Mariam Rajavi and her viewpoints, you could try Mariam Rajavi for change.com or mariam-rajavi.com.
Yes.
And also, you could find me on social media if you search my name, because I think if I try to spell it out, it might be a bit difficult. But I am, present on X, Instagram, and LinkedIn. So
Yes.
thank you very much for the time,
Mm.
and look forward to updating you hopefully with positive news next time.
Yes, no, I want to see you on television with all of your compatriots in downtown Tehran announcing democracy. We'll just work on manifesting that. So as time goes on. So all right, well, thank you everyone. We had a lovely group of people, 24 people here. Thank you everyone for joining the Cameron Journal podcast in this very unique podcast recording that I'm doing live because again the situation is so fluid. So I want to wish everyone a great afternoon. Have a great Monday. And I'll remind everyone to come back here at 7 o'clock Eastern for the Cameron Journal News Hour. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you very much.